Shalom and welcome to People on the Path. My name is Adam Lowy and I am the lifelong learning Moreh Derech at Congregation Beth Shalom in San Francisco. Each month I will welcome dynamic guests to discuss, learn, and consider what it means to be on the path. How does an individual's choices impact their path? How do the various communities that an individual participates in change their lives forever? What unsuspecting moments became the powerful ones that inform personal and professional journeys? Where does one's relationship to their Jewish identity take surprising turns, and how does it spiritually manifest? I intend for the conversation to be intimate, unscripted, and informal. The possibilities and potential will be infinite. The directions, ways, and paths will be explored, discovered, and open. Let us please take a walk together on this month's People on the Path. As our regular viewers know, it's become tradition for me to check in with our senior rabbi, Rabbi Dan Ain, before I introduce our guest. So, Rabbi Ain, come on in.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Always a treat when we get to this moment in the month, and I always appreciate you joining me on the path. We've recently,
I love taking the path with you. I mean, you've definitely opened up some doors, and we played golf recently, which was a path that you opened up for me. Where I've been playing golf now, thanks to you, and I even shot a 120 on 18, which is just great. Well, that makes my handicap, I think, 93, right? I believe that.
Yes, it is a joy spending those hours with you in our beautiful city and whacking at the grass, and sometimes
whacking is
sometimes hitting the balls in the meantime.
No, mostly the ground.
We've recently celebrated Purim, and we're going to quickly pivot from outrageous joy to slavery, bondage, and eventually the liberation that comes with the Passover holiday. So my question for you today is, as the spiritual leader of a community, how do you guide people through these extremes?
The ups and the downs? How do you guide? Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, that's a great question. I think, there are two main aspects of Judaism that we often talk about, keva and kavanah. It's something that you teach about, and that I'm sure the esteemed person who you are bringing on as a guest teaches about keva and kavanah, because these are the two aspects that I think are two sides of the coin that really make up Judaism. It's not about keva and it's not about kavanah. I think sometimes people focus exclusively on one, but you need the other. And so let me just take a moment to explain, and that's my long-winded way of answering your question. Kavanah is how you feel, and I think everyone wants to go into shul, and especially if times are good, you want to celebrate a simcha with a community, or if times are bad, you want to cry with a community. And I think, people want to have that experience. They want to have the intention, and they want to have their experience meet that intention that they have. And that is sort of the kavanah. And then there's the keva part, which is if you might not feel like praying, you might not feel like being a part of a community, you want to just stay under the covers. There's the keva part that says you got to get out of bed, you've got to go be a part of community, you've got to go, and lo tov heyot adam levado. It's not good for a person to stay under their covers for too long, I think is what that means. And so those are two aspects. And I think in dealing with amazingly large fluctuations in our world, like we've been seeing for the past 2 years, people rescheduling weddings and then having weddings, people rescheduling simchas and then having those simchas, being sad that it might not happen, and then having joy that it does come to fruition. I think having a practice to hold on to, whether that practice is coming to minyan, whether that is your own regular meditation on the golf course, or perhaps listening to music or studying Torah, which is something that I lean on a lot. Coming back to that, I think is stabilizing. It can be a stabilizing force. You realize that, the story of Jacob's ladder is often misunderstood, right? The angels are going up and down Jacob's ladder on the stairway to heaven. They're going up and down, and Jacob's at the bottom of the ladder. And the rabbis teach that it's God that's on the top of the ladder and says to Jacob, I'm with you through all of the ups and
Mm,
downs,
mm.
all of those high moments when you're at the top of the rung and all those low moments when nobody wants to talk to you. Those happen in every life. And no matter if you're at the high moment or the low moment, holding on to that ladder, the Eitz Chaim He, through our ritual and our keva, can remind us that God is with us. So that's my very long-winded way
I
of
love,
answering
I
your
love
question.
that. I love that. It's beautiful. Yasher Koach.
Yeah.
And right, yeah, like, hold on to God regardless of what you're going through.
That God is there, and it's often only on those moments when we're up at the top of the ladder that God is here, but God is there at the bottom of the ladder too when you fall
Mm,
off,
mm.
and that's important to remember.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
Rabbi,
Thank you. I look
hey,
forward. I want to hear this guest, so I'm going to drop off.
you know the drill. I'm going to ask you to turn off, and I'll bring you back in a little bit because I know you'll have questions for our guest. And here's the introduction. Today's guest is Nitza Agam. Nitza, if you have not turned on your camera and your mic, this is the time. Nitza left Israel in 1976 after completing her BA in English Literature and Theater, bound for San Francisco. She completed 2 master's degrees in English Literature and Comparative Literature with an emphasis on Holocaust poetry from San Francisco State. Nitza began her life as a teacher in independent schools and for the next 30 years taught English, history, Hebrew, and Judaica. She is the proud mother of 2 sons who are Jewish educators and teach at Beth Shalom Shabbat School. Nitza is married to her Israeli-American husband and has written about disability and the need to be seen more in society since her husband has lived with MS for over 30 years. Nitza is also an author. Her most recent publication is an anthology of essays and art by women writers and artists titled The Lemon Tree. Inspired by her late friend who hid much of her art, Nitza has compiled the truth behind what drives women writers and artists to express their creativity. A review by author and filmmaker Marlene Shigekawa states, "The Lemon Tree is a beautiful tribute from one woman artist to another. Few words can express the deep love between women that is non-sexual, a love that reflects respect and admiration for the creator's struggle. This work, through its art and words, emerges as a symphony that moves and uplifts us as we deal with birth and death and both in the creative process and in life." Nitza's other memoirs include A Scent of Jasmine, dealing with the effects of the Yom Kippur War of 1973, and Love Letters to My Mother, about the passing of her mother and a daughter's grief and love. Nitza has published poems and essays in literary magazines, educational magazines, and an essay about her husband's MS and triumphing over disability in Momentum, which is an MS magazine. Nitza has also published 2 essays in the San Francisco Chronicle's Open Forum as a disability activist. In addition to all of that, Nitza is the unofficial official dean of Beth Shalom's Hebrew program, where she teaches Hebrew and Jewish studies. Nitza continues to believe in the importance of the stories we all have to tell and the power they impart when shared. Dean Nitza Agam, welcome
Yes.
to
Thank
People on the
you.
Path.
Yes, that intro definitely puts me on the path. Thank you, Adam. And I'm very proud of being a dean at Beit Shalom. It brings me a lot of joy and a lot of affirmation to work with students who are asking questions and learning Hebrew, and it's really a weekly joy.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very aware of the joy that you have with your students and the joy that your students have with you. They are so fortunate to have you as their teacher, and I feel extremely blessed to have you a part of the Beth Shalom teaching community. And it's just been great to get to know you, to watch you in action, and to really the way you've supported me in thinking through the content and the process and what's important. You have so much experience and wisdom. So I'm just grateful that we got to work together. I love working with your sons as well, and we're just blessed in the Beth Shalom community to have the Agam family so entrenched and a part of what we're doing and supporting the learning and the notion of community and what it really means. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and getting to know you even better. I'm going to ask you kind of the same question that I asked Rabbi Ain just to start, which is, how do you balance the extremes we are facing right now? There's the joy, the bondage, the wandering, the liberation. How do you handle those moments?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed Rabbi Ain's metaphor of the ladder. I really like thinking about us all being on Jacob's ladder, and that we're in the bottom, in the middle, and on the top. That really is a wonderful image to hold because we're often on all of the extremes. For me, writing has always been the mainstay, and that started at 8 when I started writing in a diary, and that's kept me going my whole life. And through crisis, through joy, through really every phase, marriage, motherhood, a loss of a fiance, loss of friends, emigrating to Israel, and then leaving Israel to come to San Francisco, all of these journeys on that ladder, the writing has been my consistent vehicle to document my life. And that's given me comfort and affirmation because it is spiritual. Actually, I feel it's spiritual because I can find myself through the words. I can reveal myself through the words. And then, of course, I can share those stories and build community. And I have always tried to build community as well, so that writing isn't just an isolated activity,
Mm, mm.
in your room.
I love that. I love that from an early age you found writing as kind of your tether that's kept you through all these extremes, through the ups and the downs and the unknowns. And I always find it interesting when I receive the bio of the guest and where they decide to start from. And so I find it interesting that you started in 1976 when you finished your BA. Um, and where were you living where did you finish that? Where was that?
That was at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, but I was on my way to San Francisco. And that was a very difficult decision for me. I didn't want to leave Israel. I was a Zionist. I had made a commitment to Israel, to living there, to participating. So it was a sense of real sadness.
Hmm.
Um, I was excited about leaving and moving to a part of the country I didn't know about, but I was very, very sad that I was leaving. And like most people who leave in their 20s to go anywhere, you don't know if you're coming back.
Right.
And so I may have planned to return, but a part of me understood that I might not.
Hmm.
1976, I was really on my way to California from Israel. And interestingly enough, I had applied for a Hebrew teaching job through the J. It wasn't the J then, it was the Jewish Bulletin, from Israel. And I had an interview on the day that I landed at SFO at Bethel in San Mateo. And I was picked up, I think, by the rabbi or one of the rabbis, and I got the job that day. And I really like, whoa, this is cool. I'm starting out in the right direction. So, I guess teaching and writing and Jewish studies and Hebrew has always been a theme.
So, Nito, I don't know if you've watched any of these previous episodes that we've recorded and shared. What I like to spend time doing is really going back from to the beginning of your days on the earth. And so, what I want to ask you, and the reason is like we want to kind of figure out like what made you kind of make these decisions that brought you to where you are now. And so. Uh, I'm going to try to dig us back a little bit into the pre 1976 stuff for a bit, and then we'll hopefully get to the lemon tree and the stuff that you're doing right now. Uh, with that said, we're going to go way back. So I hope you're ready.
I'm ready to start my time machine.
Okay. So I think you said you emigrated to Israel.
I emigrated to Israel. I was born to Israeli parents. in New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey. And my mother was born in Palestine. My father was born in Berlin and escaped in 1933 with his parents to Ramat Gan in Israel, Palestine then. And they met as young people and came to the States, to New Jersey. So that's my beginning, is at a Jewish hospital where most of the Jews in Newark were born, and famous ones like Philip Roth, actually, and possibly Allen Ginsberg as well. I'm not sure about that one, but I know his aunt was an English teacher of mine in high school. So that's another claim to fame. But, so I am first generation American, but I grew up with parents who have always felt displacement, who have always been in between countries and cultures. And so they shaped, in a way, my connection to Israel. I visited often in the summers, and I was captivated from a very young age that this was where I was going to live. This was where I was going to go to college. And I vowed in my little diary at the age of 10 or something, when I'm 18, I'm going to Israel. And that was a firm conviction that kept me. And so at 18, I left New Jersey pretty much forever to go live in Israel. In 1969, when I graduated high school. And I left the 60s behind, not experiencing what most of my American Jewish or American counterparts were experiencing. I kind of left the 60s behind and went to live in Israel, which in 1969 was, 2 years after the Six-Day War. It would turn out a few years before the Yom Kippur War. And while it wasn't a war-torn country, you definitely felt the effects of war. And you felt the effects of a country that struggled and was challenged. But it wouldn't be until 1973, and that's another transformational point in my life, when I experienced war for the first time, probably only time, that my life really changed.
Yeah. When you realized at 10 that you were going to go live in Israel, how did you state that to your parents at that time? Did they know about your conviction and plans?
That's a good question. I don't think I shared it. It was a private conviction. It became public once I was in high school, and then I joined a Zionist youth movement, Young Judea. I became very active in Young Judea. I edited a newspaper. I traveled around the country to conferences, conventions, and Young Judea also helped shape that Zionism, that sense of connection to Israel that was there from my parents, but definitely as a more impressionable teenager, it was strengthened. And, like many other, there were a lot of us in Young Judea that had committed to going to Israel after high school. That didn't have Israeli parents. So, I would say it was a collective decision as I got older, a personal decision. And then my parents, once I made that decision, decided to also make that decision a year later, and they moved to Israel as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So as you were growing up in New Jersey with a parent from Berlin originally, parent born in Palestine, how are they composing your Jewish life for you as a kid? How did Jewish live in your home as a young child?
Well, it didn't really. That's the interesting thing. I craved spirituality. I craved connection. And like most secular Israelis, they didn't have it. And my mother was a Hebrew teacher in a Reform temple in New Jersey. Any connection I had to synagogue or temple or organized religion was through her role as a teacher. She was a great teacher too, Adam. I got it somewhere. And, so I really craved it. Passover came and we did not have a Seder. And I really, really wanted that. I think interestingly enough, my journey to Israel was based on a spiritual craving and need that only living in Jerusalem could achieve. And while my parents gave me the language, I heard Hebrew at home, I visited Israel many times, I had family, but none of that was enough. And so I think that, that's why I really liked, again, Rabbi Ains' metaphor of the ladder, because I think I was climbing the ladder, and in a way, Jerusalem was my goal. And that's why leaving Jerusalem was going to be the hardest thing, one of the hardest things I've ever done. So leaving a spiritual piece of me behind.
How did you get to Young Judea? Like, how did that happen? Was that your parents' initiative, or is that something that you?
Yeah, really through a friend. She said, "Oh, I'm in Young Judea. You want to come to a meeting?" That's simple. And I did, and I was definitely became involved. And I had two worlds. I had the world of Young Judea, and I had the world of my suburban high school in New Jersey. I had my own car at 16. I didn't go to the prom or anything, but I definitely participated in activities in the high school. And so, there was my suburban high school, and there was Young Judea. And both of them lived side by side, but clearly the more important one was Young Judea.
Well, that sounds extremely familiar to me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, I felt like 10 months of the year I was like some pretend person, and then the 2 months of the summer when I was at also my youth movement, my Zionist youth movement of Habonim Dror,
Right.
I felt like that was when I could actually be who I wanted to be, and felt totally comfortable in my own skin and in my own spirit. And I understand. And how amazing it was, right? When you discovered that, right? When you discovered that community, how amazing it was, right? I remember it when I started to like really wrap my head around, wow, this is the place that is seeing me B'Tselem Elohim.
That's right.
Is my Machane Kites, my summer camp. And so I love that you also had that experience. Okay, so you claim that there was not really any religion, spirituality in your home growing up. Would you say that your parents had strong Jewish values guiding, or that they were kind of bestowing upon you in any light, in any way, as a child?
Well, yes. I mean, my mother was a teacher, so that already gave me that educational belonging and connection. And my father became very assimilated. Working a lot, absent a lot. Again, typical suburban American life. The dad is gone. The mom is teaching part-time, but she's the one who's at home. I was more connected to my mother than I was to my father. But both of them, the one consistent message that they both gave me and my brother was Israel is our true home. Israel is where we belong. This is temporary, and we are going to go back to Israel someday. But that someday didn't really manifest until I went there.
Yeah.
Was perhaps the missionary that pulled them to Israel with mixed results. Like every dream, like every promised land, it is promised as you think.
Right.
So Israel is a very mixed country. It's not easy even for ex-Israelis to integrate into. And so that was something they discovered and that I discovered through. And then, really, they came in 1970. I came in 1969. And as a family, we were really hit with Yom Kippur War. And that really did change, I think, our lives and our relationship to the country in ways that, might not have if it hadn't happened so soon after we all got there.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How, what was a big shift for you when the Yom Kippur War went down? What did that bring to light for you as far as kind of the maybe taking away the dream of Israel
Right.
into the day to day? This is real. This is not a simple place to live. It's a very complicated place to live, particularly Jerusalem. I've also spent extended times living in Jerusalem, and that was a struggle for me. Just the constant kind of complexity and what I really felt was a legitimate tension always that I felt walking around Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened when you went from kind of your Zionist ideology of young Judea to the day to day, and
Uh,
then to experience a war?
well, I think that's it. It's the day that you living your life. Here, I'm a student at Hebrew U. I'm in love with an Israeli who actually shared my name. His name was Nitzan, and life was good and interesting and exciting and full of plans. And then, literally one day, a siren goes off, and your life is forever changed. And
Mm,
I'm actually, because we said I might read, can I read a brief? So this is from, can you see that? Yeah, Son of Jasmine is my memoir about the Yom Kippur War. And I'm just going to read you the opening paragraph because I think that captures what I was feeling and what war was going to be to me. And so I'm just going to read you, a few sentences. Um,
great. Thank you.
so it because it's a picture, it's a visual image. The tanks rolled down the highway, perched on trucks, or drove on their own. I'd never seen a tank before, and now there were so many. Our bus went one way. They went in the opposite direction, leading south to the desert. Traffic was slow. We inched along as we passed a long convoy of heavy machinery. The tanks seemed like headless horsemen without their champion warriors. I thought about how Michael hated tanks and wondered if he was in one of them. Tel Aviv was a ghost town. I walked the empty streets, thinking, wondering, and imagining those tanks moving endlessly on the highway. Tanks were supposed to make their way in sand, not on concrete highway. So that kind of gives you a little bit image of just being on a bus and just seeing all these tanks, one after the other. They really were like these kind of, headless horsemen, these machines that didn't have people in them, but represented war.
Mm,
As an American Jew, what did I know from tanks? I never saw one. Suddenly I'm seeing a lot of them. And my fiance had packed his stuff up that day the siren went off, and left to join his unit. And that was going to be the last time I saw him because he would be killed a few days later.
oy.
So that is war. I'm 22 and he's 24. And even now, my husband, who I met much later, was in the same war, in the same section where my fiance was. It turned out he was younger, and was shot in the chest in that war. And luckily, survived and evacuated. But it would turn out that two men that I was going to be connected to had been in that same war in combat.
Wow.
And so I think that affects, that it's post-traumatic. Is it post-traumatic stress syndrome? I think affects me, experiencing it not in combat, but as you can tell from being a civilian, but knowing people. I mean, I knew more than just my fiance, and it would turn out that a fellow young Judean from New Jersey would be killed in a helicopter that same war, who was a good friend of mine. So those realities, they're really incredibly dramatic.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's a very heavy part of your past. So I appreciate your willingness to share that. And I'm sorry for those losses. I I'm gonna ask if you can share. So how did that begin to change your relationship to Israel? And did you was it at that time that you started to consider leaving already, or were you did
Yeah.
that make you more committed to being entrenched in Israel?
Initially much more entrenched. I became part of a theater company that a women's theater company that wrote a play about war and living in Israel post Yom Kippur. We performed in Jerusalem. So I became really kind of committed to art, to theater, to writing. You know, this story that I published many, many years later, I'd begun writing then. I'd say again, writing saved me. You know,
Mm,
writing saved me. But the decision to leave was after 3 years and not feeling like I was moving forward, and that I wasn't healing the way I need to heal. That Israel, like I said, such a complicated country, and it was healing, and it didn't always give you tools to heal. You know, and so I felt in order to put the past behind me, I'd go to California. That was really it.
and you had met your now husband
Yes.
before you
Okay.
left Israel.
No, I met my husband only after living here for 2 years by,
Oh wow.
by chance. Well, his cousin set us up, and his cousin was my childhood friend in Israel, a Tel Aviv childhood friend who lived here and basically, was the matchmaker. So, yes, we were set up. And only then did I meet him. I mean, only then did I learn of his war experience.
Yeah.
It is not something that I knew of. He would share that with me much later.
Yeah.
And the parallels between, being an Israeli in war and young. I mean, my husband was 18. My fiance was 22. My fiance was almost 24. I was 22. You know, we're all so young to be in this reality.
Yeah.
I think, that's why, I mean, I feel like writing about Israel and writing about that war will give people insight into what Israeli reality is like, because, Israel is often criticized and sometimes obviously justifiably. But
Hmm.
I think many don't understand, what is it like to
Yeah.
live through war, and they've lived through many. I lived one.
Yeah. Yeah. Nitza, can I ask you about the second book that you
Yes.
published, and your relationship to your mother, and how first a little bit about, like, so what happened when you all were living in Israel together before you came back to the States? Uh, what was going on with your relationship to your parents at that point? Actually, didn't I was curious also, did you have any siblings?
Yeah.
Where were they?
Right.
And then clearly, I mean, to write this book, the love letters, um, to your mother. I mean, you must have had a pretty special relationship with her. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I gave you many potential questions to answer there, so
Right.
go with it where you want. But I really
Sure.
wanted to hear more about this next book that you worked on, and
Right.
kind of this honoring of your mother.
Right. Well, her name was Nomi in Hebrew, Naomi, and my middle name is Ruth. So I always feel like she and I are, Naomi and Ruth, really. And that Naomi and Ruth imagery is what was the centerpiece of that book.
Mm,
Relationship between two women who are bound to each other. And so I felt I was very connected to my mother. We were very much alike. We were very deeply connected. And losing her, and I lost her here in San Francisco, was going to become, I felt, the second, tragedy of my life. I really did compare it to losing my fiance,
mm,
even though, of course, very different. But she was, she was 69 years old. I had an illness, and so it was too soon for me. And I really did not know how I would continue without her. I think that is pretty much, many of us think about how we're going to live without our mothers or our fathers. And we all know that that's going to happen one day, but I really could not picture myself without her presence, wisdom, guidance, love. I really couldn't. And I had a hard time. Again, this book, and I think what many daughters do, as sons as well. But anyway, this book was a tribute to her memory, and a way to bring her back and to affirm, the relationship, because she was the driving force behind me going to Israel. She did not want to leave Israel actually either. My father was the one who really was the one who decided that they would leave. And so she left part of herself behind. She also had a mother in Israel still. So again, mother-daughter, lots of mother-daughter imagery here. My grandmother left Czechoslovakia she was an original Zionist in the 1920s and was on a kibbutz. So she was a real chalutza. She was a real pioneer. My mother was much more a Tel Avivi, modern, and not at all, loved dressing up, loved, being a more modern woman. And I was in between, I was a little bit of the chalutza and definitely also had the modern part. So it's interesting to kind of, I think of myself as a combination of both generations and as both women that shaped me. And yes, in some ways I am shaped more by the women than by the men. So that is true, even though I have two sons and a husband. So my life is definitely revolves around men, but I think in my influences, it is really the women.
And in that book, the love letters, were those actually letters written to her before she passed, or was that all written post?
Yeah. This is all post. This is years later. Actually, it takes me a while to, process. And well, here I'm going to again read very little. I just opened it up to Naomi, to Allen Ginsberg. You would be my mother's age had she lived, my Naomi, the Naomi who lies buried in Colma. You write of your mother, Naomi, who is buried in Newark, my hometown. Naomi, Nomi, Sam, Siegfried, Yisrael, Ima, Abba, Dad, Mom, Bubi, Imale Sheli. Newark, New Jersey, the backdrop of your life, of your mother, Naomi, it is mine too. I was born in Beth Israel Hospital with lots of other baby boomer Jews. Maybe you were born there as well. So, this poem was inspired by either hearing Allen Ginsberg's Kaddish that's written in memory of his mother. I also, knowing that his mother's name was Naomi inspired me to think, wow, his mother's Naomi, my mother's Naomi, both were born in Newark. We're both poets, I'm not Allen Ginsberg. we shared a landscape, and we shared a mother that we were very close to. But that's kind of, and you could hear in that all the languages. There's the German, there's the Hebrew, there's the English of the names that my mother and father had. Bubi he was called by his parents, my father. Yisrael was his Hebrew name. Siegfried was his German name. It's really, I guess every family has this little micro Jewish history. And I get, as a writer, I just see mine a little more clearly because I think about it. And I really did see the Germany, the Israel, the Palestine, the Zionism, the displacement, being born in Newark, leaving Newark to Israel, leaving Israel to San Francisco. Again, the ladder, climbing that ladder.
Yeah. I love that you said a moment ago, two women bound to each other, and I think that's a great way to talk about your latest work. the lemon tree, which is from my understanding is you are the collector, you are the curator of women's creations, and also, the notion that it came from a woman that was hiding her art, to me is sad to hear that somebody would hide their art, and I'm so glad that someone like you came around to pull it out of its hiding spot, and to, again, to kind of to not just create a space for two women bound to each other, but I'm assuming many women are going to literally and metaphorically be bound in this book. So tell us about that process. How did you put it together? How did you decide what was going to be in it? And tell us about what you're most proud of with this work.
Well, interestingly enough, there's 18 women, so we've got Kai in there, and it was inspired by my friend who passed away, and later other friends of hers found these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of artwork, hidden away. Very personal art, but hidden away, and that made me, like you said, very sad that she didn't feel she could share that work, and it made me think about women artists and writers and poets. What do we do with our work? So often we don't show it, we don't affirm it. We are embarrassed, we feel it's not good enough, we struggle with it. So I reached out to my community of women friends, I've taught at many schools, I have many connections, that women who are teachers, I was a docent at the Jewish Museum in San Francisco. I reached out to docents who were artists. I reached out to friends of friends, and I tried to make it multicultural. So I have Japanese American, Chinese American, African American, Jewish, younger, older, and I dedicated it to my friend Annette, who also lived in Israel, South African Jew, who left South Africa for Israel and then left Israel for California. It is in memory of my beloved friend and kindred spirit, Annette Walt. I just reached out and I got amazing essays and art. I mean, really.
Did you have to narrow things down? I mean, did you have to decide what wasn't going to make it and what was going to make it, or did you get just enough? How did that process happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was the editor, so I did make some selections, but basically whoever sent it to me, I took it because they were all great. I mean, I wasn't going to go beyond a certain number, but and then I started communicating with these women through a newsletter on a regular basis. So we created community. This is not just a book. This is a group of women now who are connecting with each other. I will be launching this book on my birthday, and I'm inviting contributors to come and read from the book. And I'm hoping to reach audiences with this book and bring the women with me so that we share our stories and the women's art, and encourage women to not hide their work. So to me was a message, I think, in this book, inspired by my friend who grew up in a very patriarchal Jewish home in South Africa, where women were not encouraged to be artists. Her father told her, art is not going to put bread on the table. So she had that message.
Yeah.
And she often repeated it to me when I would encourage her to share her work. She'd go, my father told me art is going to put bread on the table, in a very thick South African accent. So, yeah. That message was loud and clear for her.
Yeah.
And, I think for a lot of us, and maybe, again, not just women, I'm sure being an artist, being an educator, being a rabbi, being any one of these professions which are not always acknowledged, affirmed, it's not simple.
Yeah. Yep.
as you know.
Yep. When's the birthday party? When's the reading? Where?
April 10th on a Sunday. Yeah,
April 10th.
10th, yes.
And this book is out now. We can get it.
Yes, this book is out. It's on Amazon, and it's called The Lemon Tree, which was, during the pandemic, what gave me comfort was a lemon tree outside my window. And I had another Israeli friend artist create an image of the lemon tree, which is on the cover and in the book. And so, it's also a way of nature being comfort during this really anxious time that we all experienced. My lemon tree was my source of comfort. So, this book is also around, comfort and affirmation of nature.
I'm looking forward to checking it out, and I think it's so wonderful that you managed to get it done, to get it organized, and to raise up these expressions of the community that you built. I want to bring in Rabbi Ain because I know he's got some good questions that he wants to ask you right now, because he always does. So, Rabbi Ain, you've heard a pretty awesome tale up till now. What do you want to ask Nitza?
Yeah, I think our community knows Nitza probably most through her sons. And it was really interesting for me to hear about the powerful matriarchal line that you come from. And what I think a lot of families that I talk to are struggling with is, especially during these times, is child rearing. And you've given two amazing sons to this world. And I think, can you share maybe a little bit about how do you raise boys in the current environment, and what sort of wisdom can you share with our families?
Yeah, well, that is interesting. I think I wanted a daughter because of my connection with my mother. And then I realized once I knew I was going to have sons, I thought, oh, well, maybe we'll see what this is like. They're both very sensitive young men. And I'm glad that somehow I could help, that Ofer and I could cultivate the sensitivity and the ability to, be above the fray and not be macho and, all of that. So, but I think that's a challenge for them. And I think it's a challenge for young men, to be sensitive, to be a little bit different. So I think it was challenging for me as a mother. I think, again, being an artist, a writer, I understood that I had to validate and continue to validate what they wanted and needed. And that's still a challenge.
Yeah, so talk just a little bit more about that, because I really resonated with what you said about art. And it's very much a part of my home, which is, free creative thought and using tactile things and create, your own stories, your own imagination. And yet that voice that you have in your head reminds me a little bit of my mother, who to this day still says to me, well, what about a gap in your resume?
Yes,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, I am still the Jewish mother that pushes, especially one son in particular. I push him. So did you interview for that job? I mean, what about that job? He always jokes with me, and him, he has a sense of humor about, I think it was Larry David, who he his mom said, work for the post office. Well, why can't you work for the post office? Get a good job. And that is so typical of us. We might be artists, we might be writers, but in some way we want our kids to have that steady income, be mainstream,
be a professional somehow. That was definitely, my grandmother wanted me to be a part of the professional class. And that, what is that? Is that an immigrant value? What is that? What is that about?
Yeah, I do. I think it is an immigrant value. I think it's a mainstream value. I think it's a consumer-oriented value. Yeah, have the pension, have the salary, have the home,
what if you don't have those things? Then who are you? And we all know that you're many things without them, many things. But it's hard to not, those scripts are very deep in our brain. And as parents, even if you as a not parent didn't believe that, somehow, when you're a parent, you say, oh, come on, do this. It's a good income, even if it's not what you want to do.
No, I always think my son is 7, and
Yes.
he had a little miming phase. And so when anybody asked him what he wanted to do when he would grow up, he would say, I want to be a mime.
Yes.
And you can imagine.
Right,
right. Monetize? Can you Marceau, but can you monetize that?
Right. Exactly. Yes. And you know what? We go through that all the time. It doesn't.
And I think it's great. And he's a young, sensitive boy, and he really he likes to mime, he likes to dance, and just to let him go and to not judge. I think a lot of us who maybe came from immigrant stock, which I believe is all of us as Jews, have that critical voice in our head that says, well, this is not efficacious, this isn't pragmatic, and I think that so much of our tradition is full of mystery and greatness, which is found by not following the beaten path, if you will. So I think that's very important. I have one more question, and I promise, Adam, this is my last question.
You're good. We're doing great.
You said that you were told when you were young that we're all, we're with the wanderers,
right?
And we're not home, and home is Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
Would you say that today?
Interesting. That's a good question, because I've made San Francisco my home, and my children's home, and my husband's home. San Francisco became our home. But I do still think there is, and again, whether it was the influence of the Zionist youth movement, whether it was, there still is this very deep attachment and connection. I mean, I love when I go to Israel that I'm speaking Hebrew. I love that sense of familiarity. I love the quirks. I think everything is kind of romantic and charming, and I recognize that can also be destructive. I know, like I said, I know my husband suffered from Israeli scripts. I know that it's not an easy country to grow up in, and I know that it can be narrow-minded. So all of that. But yeah, I guess I would say yes, I still do. Yeah, even though I will acknowledge that it's not my physical home and has not been. I only lived in Israel 7 years out of the 70 that
I just was curious if Reshit Smichat Gulatenu was still alive. That's what I was. If this establishment of Medinat Yisrael was the beginning of the dawn of our redemption, or if we've gone too far removed from that. That's the heart of my question, because that's something that's alien in the Bay Area. So that's.
You're right. It is, and you're right. Absolutely, I agree with you. You're right. It is, and it's I agree with you. Yeah.
Well, I thank you for your amazing contributions, and for sharing your really powerful story, and for joining. And Adam, always thank you for the beautiful way in which we get to know the people that we're in community with. So Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Rabbi, too.
Of course.
Thank you, Rabbi Ain. Nitza.
Whoa, you took me on a journey. You definitely took me on a journey, Adam.
It has been my honor, and I'm always grateful for our guests when they get into that comfortable spot to share really powerful moments and really serious experiences that they had, and how they've guided you to be who you are. And I've been really enjoying getting to know you, and we check in every week about Hebrew, and those are brief. And even from the moment we met, you just immediately wanted to offer your expertise and your knowledge to me to support me in the work that I'm trying to do. And I just so glad that we had this time today. I feel like I really got to know you much more, and I will check out your latest book for sure. I
Great,
really
great.
want to
I
see
would,
what you
yes,
put
yes,
together.
yes. And you know that I come from a family of writers. My husband wrote a biblical poetic book called The Othered, which talks about Esav and Ishmael. And my son has written 2 mysteries. So we are definitely a family of writers, and we are happy to share our work with everybody. So yeah, it's fun. There's a lot of different kinds of writing going on in this house.
Well, we're grateful that that you're not hiding the writing, and that
Right,
it's available to
right.
all of us, and that again, it's another peek into who you are and what you've experienced along the way. So, Nitza, at this time is when I ask the people on the path speed round
Okay.
questions.
All right.
I ask most of these questions to each guest. They shift slightly depending on our conversation up till now. And I thank you for answering these without a deep amount of thought and reflection, and just kind of what pops in as soon as you hear this question. So
Okay, I will
I'm gonna
try.
I'm gonna
Mhm.
ask. This is the first one. What are 5 necessities that you must have with you on the path?
Books, pen and paper, good food, and love and admiration from friends and family. What? How many is that? What I might.
That's good. Is pen and paper 1, or is that 2?
Well, let's make it 2, Adam. Let's make it.
So good. We got books, pen and paper, good food, love and admiration. That sounds like
That's a good combo.
that's a good backpack to have
Okay.
on.
Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Everything you need.
Right. Right.
This is not a speed round question, but I got to ask you, what is good food to you in the Bay Area? Where, if you were going somewhere for good food, where are you going?
Um, Interesting. We're pretty Israeli in our tastes. We love salads and simple food. So I'm still looking for a really good Israeli Jewish place. So I can't tell you really that. I mean, I love Greek food. I love Middle Eastern food. So wherever we can find it, I'm happy. That is my favorite, I have to say. It's tahini and falafel and hummus and that I love all that stuff, and Israeli salad. So Israeli pickles and olives, which you can buy in Safeway. I'm lucky. Those are my go-to.
I know that aisle well.
Right, exactly.
The Israeli pickles are a big part
Oh
of my
my
home as
gosh,
well.
Israeli pickles are the
Thank
best.
goodness. Nitza,
Right.
what's your favorite Jewish holiday?
Actually, Passover coming up. Yes, I love it. I've always loved it. So I love the ritualistic. I love the storytelling. I love the creative part of it. I love the communal part of it. Definitely, it has all the elements of, I think, what's important to me, and it's an opportunity to be in community, either with friends or with family, and to create your own ritual. And we've always had it with friends and family, and we've traveled far and wide to join friends for Seder. And this year we'll be at home, but again with friends. So Passover is it. Pesach.
I'm sure you read books a lot. What's a recent read that you would like us to know about?
I like Israeli writers, and I discovered some Israeli women writers that, of course, right now escape me, but there have been really some interesting Israeli women writers. I took a class in Israeli literature at SF State, and I discovered writers I had never heard of. And I love, Yehuda Amichai as a poet, and I love Aleph Bet Yoshua as a writer, and Amos Oz as well. So those I'm really love Israeli literature. And it was great to discover women. Next time I'll try to remember names that I can actually give you of great Israeli women writers.
Excellent. And if you could walk the path with any person, they can be someone living, it could be someone who's passed, it could be even a person as their future self. Who would you like to walk the path with?
Well, it's going to be the biblical Ruth and Naomi too. I would love to walk the path with them. They both represent such strength in times of adversity, in times of grief. They found strength in each other, and they found strength in that bond. So yeah, I would have loved to meet them and walk with them. And I think somehow, in some way, I am, walking with them.
I was going to say that. I was absolutely going to say that. You have found yourself side by side,
right?
Walking with them. And then the last question is what do you see ahead of you on the path?
Well, I'm loving teaching, and I really love teaching at Beit Shalom. So I want to continue to be Dean Agam, and work with you and the community, and of course more writing, more books. There's more coming. The Lemon Tree is the first of, I think, many anthologies that I would love to put together of women's work, because I think our experiences are so diverse and varied, and ups and downs. I thought it'll be fascinating to choose another topic and have women contribute. So that's my next goal, is that would be the next book. And so I'd say writing, teaching, continuing to be a mother to sons, a wife to Ofer, and to seeing where they all go and how they develop. And of course, to mentor students who are the real joy and have been. I started teaching when I was 30. That's a long time ago. And they still give me the same exact joy they gave me then. So, I'm very grateful to have found a profession that affirms that joy in that way.
Well, how fortunate for a student to have a teacher who finds joy in the work. That's always how I've learned best, is when the teacher who loves what they're doing really makes learning painless. It doesn't feel like you're learning. You're living, and you're just drawn to that passion. And so we're really fortunate, again, to have you teaching so many of our youth. And I wanted to ask how many of the 18 contributors are local in your book?
Oh, many. I'd say the bulk are local. Let me just give a quick count out of the 18. I mean, some are out of state, some are out of the country. Out of the 18, I'd say at least over half are local. Definitely.
All right, I'm
over half.
My brain is bubbling with some possibilities. I think what we should try to have you do an event at Beth Shalom with some of these people, live reading and sharing. So we'll discuss this, but I think it's a beautiful way to celebrate the book and to honor the contributors. So we'll discuss this more.
Okay, Adam, that would be great.
Along the way. So Dina Gam, anything else you would like to share?
Well, this has been a real opportunity. Thank you for listening and for helping me share and articulate my story. And it's been a real pleasure to be interviewed by you, by Rabbi Ain, and to just be part of this. So it's a very special Shabbat. I want to say Toda Rabba, and thank you, Adam, for doing it.
Thank you for allowing us to walk on your path with you today. I'm just going to finish off with my closing little goodbye, and then Nitza, if you can stick on after we stop recording.
Sure.
We'll just check in.
Should do you want me to stop?
Yeah, you're good. Stop and mute, and I will finish off.
Okay.
People on the Path is shared on the last Wednesday of each month. The next one will come out on Wednesday, April 27th. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. I hope this conversation has been valuable and will support your efforts to find your footing and balance as you continue to navigate and blaze your path. One step at a time, like Nitza, I encourage you to walk your path with courage, wonder, curiosity, and an open mind, body, and spirit. Shalom and Nisya Tova, safe travels as you explore. And I'll see you next month, everyone. Thanks so much.